As I mentioned, my name is Jeff Blankenburg. In addition to being an organizer of Stir Trek, I also had the good fortune to join Amazon right at the time that Alexa was being released in 2016. And I have spent my entire time since Alexa has been available to the world working on the team that makes that. So I spend lots and lots of time not only talking to audiences like this, but also I have a deep involvement in deciding how it works, how we build things for it. And for those of you that don't know, Alexa, aside from being a device that you can sit on your kitchen counter, also has the ability for all of us to build apps for it, right? So we can build things we call skills, and you can build your own voice-enabled software that works inside of Alexa just like all the other functionality does. It's been a very cool adventure, and as a part of that, I get to see what the future looks like. I get my own vision sometimes, and I get to help kind of shape that future vision as I'm there. But I spend a lot of time thinking about, well, what is what we're doing with Alexa today look like 5 years or 10 years from now? And so that's kind of the purpose of this talk. And so one of the things that I always like to remind people is that, yes, I am coming at this from an Alexa perspective, but I'm not here to talk about Alexa. I'm talking about voice and ambient computing and AI in all of our lives in the future. And with that, I always like to start this kind of talk especially with a great big disclaimer. All of us have a computer in our pocket that has access to things like Twitter, and the last thing I want is for anyone to say, Jeff said that Amazon's announcing this thing tomorrow. I am not here to make any announcements of any kind. These are future-looking thoughts. These are aspirational goals. But I am not here to tell you that any of the things that I'm about to talk about are going to be available in the next 6 months or even the next 6 years. So I hope you get some inspired, interesting ideas about where this kind of industry and this technology is headed. But I do like to start with that great big disclaimer. So let's talk about the future. Right? We're always right at its doorstep. We're already almost into the future. And if you think about the technology that we use today, if you told somebody 25 years ago that you were going to have a computer in your pocket that had access to the world's information, I'm not sure they would have believed you. But here we are doing that today. And as we think about the future, right, it's big and it's fuzzy, and we only have kind of a weird perspective on what we think that future might look like. There's lots to define, there's lots to understand. We'll talk about some of that in this conversation. But at the core of everything, at the core of all of this future, all this technology that we think about, at its core are people. People are the thing that we do almost everything as a result of. This event is a great example. This event doesn't happen without people. But think of all the work that we do, all the software that we write. We write that software for people. We make their lives easier, that make them more productive. Everything that we do involves people. And as a result of that, and certainly as a result of the last 2 years or so that we've been kind of locked away, there's been a lot of us that said, man, I really could use fewer people in my life. I could use as much distance as I could possibly get, right? I wish I was the last person on Earth. I wish I could just kind of get away, get outside, do the things I want to do without having to worry about viruses and all the other things that are going on. And as I thought about this idea, the idea that just being alone for a while seems pretty nice if you're trapped in your home with 4, 6, 8 people. Being alone sounds really good. I thought about this picture in particular and being the honest last person on Earth and just how much that would be awful, right? At first it would be like, oh, look, I've got access to every Costco on Earth. I can go take all the things that I need, and I would have access to resources and whatever. But quickly it becomes a game of survival, right? And if you think about all the energy and the excitement and the joy that you get from life, more often than not, those things come from other people. Even for those that are introverts, they may often say oh, no, I don't need people, that exhausts me. I think introverts have even realized during all of these pandemic times that yeah, in fact, I do need people occasionally. I need time to spend with people and enjoy the company of others. So as I thought about the technology that we use, I thought it was interesting to take a little look back at some of the modern futuristic technology that we use today and take for granted, and just show how much it's shaped our lives. So I wanted to think of a technology that we use today and find an image of it that would bring as much stress and anxiety to all of you as I could find. And so the photo I found was one of the incoming call. I thought this would be one that would really stand out to all of us as something we never, ever want in our lives. And so as I looked at this picture, I identify with this, right? My phone rings all the time. I can't tell you the number of times Amazon's contacting me because someone bought 17 iPhones on my account, or my car's extended warranty needs to be talked about. But in all those cases, the incoming call has become just this amazing amount of like, oh, incoming call, no thank you, right? And someone will say, you're in a meeting or whatever, and you're like, hey, you know what, I'll call you later. What's everybody's response to that these days? Whoa, don't call me, that's crazy. Text me, send me a message, hit me on Slack, whatever. Do not call me. And the reason for this, which is obvious to everyone, I think, is because phone calls aren't asynchronous. Phone calls demand my time, my attention right now. And if we think about all of the other technologies that I just mentioned, texting and Slack and everything else, those are all very synchronous, right? I have the opportunity to respond when it makes sense for me, on my schedule, the way I want to do things. And I think that COVID has even introduced the opportunity for us to work synchronously. I don't know if everybody is still working a straight 8 to 5, 9 to 5 kind of role, but I know a lot of people, especially as someone that works with a team in Seattle, my mornings are dedicated to getting a bunch of stuff done, because the moment I hit noon, my team shows up on the West Coast, and I've got meetings from like noon to 5, noon to 6. Sometimes they love to roll me all the way till 8 o'clock, but I've been doing a better job of blocking my calendar. So I don't want that phone call. I want that to go away. But it's weird to me that we carry this device around in our pockets, right? But we call it a phone, but I so rarely use this as a phone. It's amazing. It's used for everything else. But one of the interesting things that I found, especially with our phones, is the times that we actually have opportunities to get together with people. If you think about sitting at a restaurant or going out with some friends, one of the things that we used to do all the time, especially like back in the 80s and 90s, you'd be sitting around and someone would pose a question, like, who's won the most Academy Awards? Does anyone know? It's a tough question. So let's say somebody asked that question. Today, I can almost guarantee someone right now is on their phone like, I can figure this out. I can find the answer. I need to know, right? We have this need to know that is inescapable. But back then, back when we were sitting at that table, there was a moment where someone would say, oh, I think it's this person. By the way, does anyone have a guess? Meryl Streep is a guess. Anyone else? Daniel Day-Lewis, Tom Hanks. Okay, you're all wrong, but those are good guesses. So as we think about how we would have handled this before we had phones in our pocket, we would have had to agree to disagree. This is a thing that has completely disappeared from the world of people. We don't agree to disagree anymore. We have to know the answer. We have to show you that you're either right or wrong. We have to dig in and find whatever that answer is. And as I joked, someone's looking it up. The answer is Katharine Hepburn, for those of you that didn't know. But a lot of the good guesses are here. This kind of thing has disappeared from our world. I mean, think about what would have happened. Let's say it's 1985. We don't have the internet. We don't have any of the stuff that we have today. If you have that question and you're sitting at a table at a bar and you don't know the answer and no one is confident enough to say, like, oh, I just watched the Oscars. They said it was Katharine Hepburn. What would you have done to find the answer? Would you have gone, like, okay, hold on, let's go to the library. Let's go look that up. You're not going to do that. So you just wouldn't know. And it's amazing to me as we continue down this path of technology, how much we refuse to not know things, which I think is probably good for humans. We're always pursuing knowledge. We're always chasing to understand and know how things work. But it's an interesting thing to think about. In addition to knowledge chasing, we have people that have all sorts of things that they want to do with their time, right? We have people that are dedicated to being athletes, to being bigger and stronger and faster than they were yesterday. They want to spend their time doing that, right? We all know that person that's like, no, I can't go out. I got to go for a run. I mean, I don't like that person, but I know them, right? We have artists, right? Some of you are probably artists here in the room that you want to spend your time creating things. I know that as a result of COVID, we've seen lots of my friends, especially in this industry, that have gotten into woodworking, right? I have these friends that are now making these beautifully, like, color inlaid chessboards and all sorts of beautiful stuff out of wood because they had the time. They were sitting at home. They had nowhere else to go. So they taught themselves how to do a lot of these things, right? I know I still spend a lot of time writing software, just interesting projects I want to figure out or I want to solve how to do something. But we're doing this. These are the things we choose to do in our free time. One other one that I've gotten into, I will shamelessly admit, This is my wife's fault. During COVID, my wife's like, hey, you have a bunch of tubs of sports cards in the basement. You've had them since you were 15. You've done nothing with them since. While we're here in COVID, I need you to figure out what's in there and either get rid of it or organize it or something. And I was like, I don't have an excuse not to do it. It's been 25 years. I guess I'll do it. And so I started going through them, and I realized that I had a couple of things that were reasonably valuable, nothing that's going to make me retire, but interesting cards. And so I started looking them up and looking on eBay and finding prices and doing all this other stuff, and I found all the modern cards that are being sold today. And before I knew it, I was completely sucked back into the world of like buying and trading and selling sports cards. And so this is another thing that like I'm now choosing to spend my time doing this stuff, right? This is the stuff beyond the things I have to do, work and house and family and all that other stuff. This is like, hey, I have some free time. I want to work on this hobby. We all probably have some of this, right? We're living without question in like the golden era of television. We're all subscribed to 37 different streaming services to watch one show on each of them. And it's absolutely amazing how much great television there is these days. By the way, I just watched a new show that most people have not. There's a TV show called From. Has anybody else watched From? Literally no one. Awesome. Did anybody like Lost? I mean, maybe not the last season, but most of it, right? So this is a show that is similar. It's made by the people that made Lost, and it's got a little more horror to it than Lost did. But it's got all the weird twists and turns and questions and how did that thing happen and whatever. It's fantastic. It's on Epix, I think. Anyway, lots and lots of services. But the reason that I bring up television specifically is because I want to show you just how much time we're all spending doing these kinds of things. That is the average time spent per US adult 18 and over. It's broken down by quarter. And you can see that, let's just take the 3 bars in total. Each of them are over 10 hours a day. 10 hours a day, Americans on average are consuming media on their devices. This is watching TV on your phone or using your laptop. This is not doing work. This is consuming media content. Playing video games, all of that kind of stuff. If you work, let's say you work 8 hours a day, and then you do this on average 10 hours a day, when is anyone sleeping? Right? It's no wonder we're all so tired and coffee is like the #1 thing everybody cares about, right? This is an amazing number to me. It's not important in the grand scheme of this presentation, but as I was looking into this, I just found this remarkable. I don't know how everybody else feels about this. I don't feel like I'm even close to these averages, but when I look at the time used on my phone sometimes, I'm not happy with the number I see. So I'm on my phone more than I think I am. Anyway, we as people are all unique. We're all individuals. We all have things that we really care about that make us unique, right? We all have passions and interests and whatever that keep us focused on the things that we're most excited about. But all of us have one thing in common, at least all of us as adults, and that is that we all have stuff. We all have things that we don't want to do or that we have to focus on that we don't necessarily want to. Right? They float around our heads like, hey, I've got this thing to do, and I've got this thing. And sometimes they're positive, right? They're things like, I heard we were going to send people to Mars. When's that happening? I think that'd be cool. Like, those are just random things that pop into your head when you're in the shower or whatever. Excuse me. But there's also lots and lots of other things that pop into our head that aren't so great, right? When was the last time I saw my doctor? Does my tooth hurt because it's a cavity? I probably should call the dentist. How are my kids doing in school? What do my parents think of my career? Like all of those things start to float in our heads, right? We all have those kind of like negative, kind of self-defeating thoughts as we go through life. And this is where I want to introduce to you the concept of a personal AI companion. This is way beyond like a device that sits on your counter that you can ask it for jokes and weather. I'm talking about an always-on, always-thinking artificial intelligence bot that is designed specifically to serve you and only you. It can anticipate, it can think, it can do the things that you would think of a human assistant being able to do for you, with all the context and knowledge and information that's required to do so. I want you to imagine for a minute that we're all so wildly successful and wealthy that we have all hired our own personal human assistant. Think of all the things that you could have that person do for you, right? And you could do it so simply. There's always the joke about like, oh, my assistant's going to go get me coffee, or my assistant's going to go pick up my laundry. But when we talk about those things, for the people that have those kinds of scenarios, they don't say, hey, I would really like a coffee that has 2 creams and a sugar and a shot of vanilla and whatever else people put in coffee, because I don't drink it. We just say, hey, can you go get me a coffee? And they know. They already know what the order is going to be. They already know what I like. When I say, hey, can you pick up my dry cleaning if that's a thing? I don't have to tell them what location my dry cleaning's at. I don't have to do any of that stuff. They already know where that stuff goes and where to get it and how to pick it up. Am I flipping ahead? No. Okay. So I want you to imagine a personal AI companion that functions like that. Now, in order to have a technology like this, because a lot of you are thinking, man, this is big picture stuff, I need to establish that with all of this comes an unbelievable amount of trust and security. None of this, none of the future of real, useful technology in our world is going to happen without trust and security being paramount, first before anything else. So let me tell you a little story about security and trust. I want you to imagine you've woken up, you walk out the front door of your house and you have this beautiful view, right? You can see the rainbow pinpoints on each blade of grass as the sun shoots through them. You can see the beautiful sunrise over the mountains. And just as you're about to take that first deep breath of like mountain air, you see me running out of the woods at you, screaming and waving my hands and saying, hey, I need you to know this is the last sunrise. You better enjoy this one because there will not be another sunrise. As you would expect, you would all look at me like I'm crazy. I'm soaked up to my knees in dew. I just came running out of the woods. Probably not a reliable source, but as you look at me, you'll say, I have too much prior knowledge, too much information, too much understanding of our solar system and how all of this works to ever possibly believe you that the sun isn't going to rise tomorrow. It's going to rise tomorrow just like it did today. That's an incredible amount of trust in how all of these things work. We need that AI companion to be that trusted. I know that it's going to do the things that it's supposed to do because it always does. It always has, it always will. I trust that it's going to work. I want you to think about another piece of technology that we all have become very familiar with, the Bluetooth headphones. How many of you trust your headphones the way you trust the sunrise? Anybody? Think about all the times that you've put those on and it doesn't pair with your device, or it's not charged, or something else fails, or it can't find your device, or it's not connected to Wi-Fi, or there's like 70 things that could go wrong with your headphones. And every time you put them on, you're just like, hope this works. But you don't believe that it works, and you're not surprised when it doesn't work. That's an unacceptable amount of performance for something like what I'm describing. It just needs to work. It needs to work every time. It needs to be reliable. If you can't trust it, you won't use it. And as somebody that has done a ton of online streaming content as a result of this pandemic, I can tell you that I stopped using my Bluetooth headphones and I got a set of wired ones because they were always there. They were always ready. Anytime I needed them, I could put them on my head and I knew that they would work because there was so few things to fail. It was a wire plugged into my computer. No Bluetooth, no other connections, no other worries, because I needed something I could rely on, something I could trust. So let's go back to our headphones aren't working, the doorbell just rang, the dog's barking, the kids crying in the other room, the stove's on fire, there's all sorts of stuff going on. We take a deep breath, maybe we put the fire out, but we take a deep breath, we walk out to the mailbox to see what arrived for the day. Maybe there's something cool in there. In my case, maybe it's a baseball card. And what do we find when we get out there? Bills. And now as we're walking back from the mailbox, all those thoughts start to churn in our head again. How am I going to pay this? And man, it looks like I actually missed my electric bill last month. I'm going to solve that problem. How am I going to have enough money for this thing? And we're back in that cycle again of just worry and concern and how am I going to handle all of this stuff? I mean, something like bills, this is something that I have to make very subjective manual decisions about, especially if I don't have enough money to cover all of my bills. How would I possibly be able to think about where is the money going to go to the right place? How do I save for retirement? If I'm trying to get my kids to go to college, like where does all this money go? And so when I talk with people, especially about this topic, and I say, well, we're going to let AI do that for you, they panic. No, I have to make the decisions. I have to decide how this stuff's all going to work. And I want to let you know that in the grand scheme of everything I'm describing, you as the human are always in charge. You're always in control. Anything that you want to do or need to do, you can do it. But when you don't want to, and you just want things to happen, I don't want to think about my bills. I like to pitch this as, imagine never paying your bills again. Everybody likes that idea. But it's when you realize, oh, I'm just not doing the paying, but in fact, the bills are being paid. And many of us have set up things like auto pay on our bank accounts and stuff like that, but not for everything. There's always a few that you're like, no, that one I'm going to hold on to. I need to do that manually, or I need to handle this separately, or it's a variable amount, so I'm never sure how it's going to be handled. So bills are one where I propose, in fact, I think with the right AI, with the right algorithms, with the right machine learning, we could actually stop paying our bills and stop thinking about that stuff. We could lean into things that are going to take care of the savings that is appropriate for us and pay the bills at the times that they're appropriate to be paid. It's going to manage things in a way that is probably vastly different from how you would do it, but I also think it might do it in a way that saves you the time and the hassle and the stress of like, where am I going to move my money and how am I going to handle it? You just tell it some priorities and it handles the rest for you. This is a hard step for people to get over. But if you think about some of the other ways that we're using AI today, it's not a big reach. Think about the game of chess. The grand masters of chess have gone on record saying that computers, machine learning, they've ruined their game. Because a computer can beat a human consistently every time now. It's nearly impossible to beat the best AI at chess. The game, for the most part, has been ruined because there's no way you can look 45 moves ahead in a game of chess. The best humans are 7, maybe 8 moves ahead. You're not going to be able to beat a computer that can look so far ahead and analyze every possible move of every possible game that ever happened. It's hard. You see the same with the game Go. There's been a ton of research in trying to make that game beatable by a computer, and now it's not even fun to play against a computer. You see this in the stock market too. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but the majority of the trades that happen in the stock market today aren't happening by humans. They're happening by computers in microseconds. There will be algorithms that are sitting and they're buying something now and selling something now, right? And they're waiting for that one penny bump. And if it goes up 1, I'll sell it. I'll keep the profit because they bought 1 million shares. They just made $100,000 or $10,000. And I can't do math right now. But in any case, this stuff is happening rapidly, so much so that near the New York Stock Exchange, the rent immediately around that building is astronomically high because the length of the cable you need from your servers to the stock exchange is shorter. The only latency in the way of all of this stuff happening is how long is the cable? How long do you have to travel your signal between your machine and the stock exchange? This became such a problem that the stock exchange actually had to introduce miles and miles of cable inside their building to provide latency to everyone, because the market for the real estate so close to their building was unbelievably high. I mean, like it was a problem, and it was an unfair advantage for anyone that couldn't afford to be in those specific buildings. So this is happening today. Lots and lots of trading is happening as a result of really complicated algorithms and machine learning. We also see this in medicine. This isn't as prevalent yet, but there are a lot of very interesting headlines that are coming out of the idea that medicine is going to start using AI and machine learning more and more and more. We see headlines like this all the time. AI is outperforming doctors. Now, you won't see in any of these articles that doctors are doing a bad job. Doctors are not doing a bad job. In fact, they're doing better than they ever have. But when taking that same casework, that same information about the patient, they're finding that artificial intelligence can actually make diagnoses earlier and better than doctors do. They can see things that a doctor would not be able to see without having a massive amount of data to be able to look specifically at one specific use case. This is not like, I don't know if you guys have heard about this person. There is a woman that can smell Alzheimer's. Have you heard about this lady? I don't know if it's actually true, but there was a study done. They brought 14 people in. 7 of which they knew had Alzheimer's. She smelled Alzheimer's on 9 of them. And 10 years later, the 2 extra people were diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I don't know if that works or not, but she's a miracle worker. But in the idea of AI, being able to take the subjectivity, take the human element away from the diagnosis, has actually seemed to have some success when we're looking at a broad amount of casework, a huge amount of data that we can pull. But in a more fun, spirited way, the baseball season just started. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in the minor leagues, they're doing some experiments with artificial intelligence. If you've ever watched a game on TV, especially in prime time, they draw a really nice box on the screen for you that shows you where the strike zone is. And one of the most frustrating things about watching baseball is the subjectivity of the umpire. Sometimes the ball will go through the box, and the umpire will call it a ball. And sometimes the ball will go outside the box, and the umpire will call it a strike. And they always say, like, well, certain pitchers, the elite pitchers, they'll get extra calls, they'll get more courtesy from the umpires or whatever, which I think is just hot garbage. Like, everybody should be treated fairly, it should all be the same way. And so what they're doing in the minor leagues is they've constructed a grid using cameras and lasers and a bunch of other stuff to identify the actual strike zone. The actual geometry of the strike zone is a vertical column coming out of that home plate, and they have enough information to be able to identify immediately whether or not the ball passed through that zone or did not pass through that zone. Instead of taking the umpire out of the game, what they've done instead is give him an earpiece. And so he gets a tone when the ball's a strike, and he gets nothing when it's a ball. So he can hear instantly, it's a strike, and then he can make the signal. So to the onlooker, the game is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. But now when you watch it on TV, when you analyze, like, how much did the umpire influence the game, which is something they study, they will be able to eventually have the umpire be right every single time about balls and strikes. There's 400 other reasons why an umpire is standing there behind home plate, for calls, for foul balls, for a number of other things. But being able to use this kind of technology to decide something as trivial as a ball or a strike is a really cool concept. So let's go back to telephones for a second. Some of you may not have ever used a phone that looks like this. We had them in my house for sure. But when was the last time you wanted to call your dentist? Anybody? My dad's a dentist, so I have an excuse, but most people don't. Most people are like, oh, dentist, I don't even want to think about it, right? It's expensive, it's painful. There's a number of other things why I don't want to call my dentist. But if you think about the way that things work today, for those of you that go to the dentist regularly, right, you're in the chair, you're getting your cleaning or treatment or whatever, and they say, hey, we need you back in 6 months. Would you like to schedule your appointment? And you're like, 6 months, sure, I'm wide open. What do you got? And they're like, how's this Tuesday in October at 8 a.m.? Yeah, that sounds like that'll work perfectly. And so you put it in your phone, or they give you that little business card that you tuck in your pocket and lose instantly, whatever it is, and they give you that information. But then about 2 weeks before your appointment in October, they send you a text message, and they're like, hey, just want to remind you of your appointment on that Tuesday at 8 a.m., and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be out of town for work, or my kid's got a thing, or whatever. Like, it never actually works out, because everybody's calendar is free 6 months from now. Of course, I'm wide open. But life happens, things get scheduled, and before you know it, it just doesn't work out. And so you have to call their API, right? You have to make an API call to their office, which is a phone call, and you have to interface with their API, which is the human on the other end, and you have to sync calendars, right? And you have to say, hey, I have Wednesday open. They're like, oh, we're scheduled until November. What would you like in November? You're like, oh man, well, I'm free on this Tuesday. Oh, the dentist doesn't actually work on Tuesdays. How's Wednesday? And like, you do this constant like back and forth. What if instead, for every appointment you ever needed to make, you just got a notification on your phone or a device in your house just says, hey, I got you a dentist appointment for next Tuesday. That's it. You never asked for it. It just happened because it needed to happen. It was thinking for you. It was anticipating. Think about what that really means. It has to be able to look at your calendar, or all of your calendars, as my life seems to be. It has to be able to look at my dentist's calendar, which means it needs access to their software to be able to see what the openings are, when the people that I work with are actually going to be there. And it probably also needs to talk with my healthcare system to make sure that my dental insurance makes me eligible for another cleaning on that specific date, because they're very consistent about that 6-month window. It has to talk to all of those systems. It has to know that, by the way, I'm eligible for that thing, and then it actually needs to schedule it. All of that stuff could happen behind the scenes. Most of you, I think almost all of you, work in the software industry today. You're all thinking, well, yeah, we could do that today. But we don't. Because the dentist system probably isn't even cloud exposed. My calendars are all over the place, and they're all incompatible. My dental insurance is probably not even accessible in that way, not from a programmatic state, because everybody's building these little walled gardens of data. We own our thing, you own your thing. They don't talk to each other. We're going to keep them separate, and if you want access, it's like $500,000 a call, or whatever it might be. We're heading in the wrong direction. What we need is a democratization of data. Now, I'm not someone that's going to get up here and stand and say, all data should be accessible to everyone, but there is a camp of people that say that your bank account information should be public and accessible, that your health records should be public and accessible, and that they eventually will be, and it's inevitable. I don't know that I necessarily believe that, but there are people that do. That would make things a whole lot easier from this perspective, but we start to lean out of the security world of like, I don't want people to know what's in my bank account. I don't want people to know my health records. I don't want them to know the conditions I have. And as a perfectly healthy, straight white male, like I don't have a lot of things going against me. But I can see why people that might have a specific diagnosis or condition or lifestyle or whatever it might be, I can see how they might be discriminated against if that information was available in public. So no, I don't think it all should be. But I think we need to find ways to be able to combine and mix all of the different disparate data that's out there in a way that's useful for people, which is the point of all of this. Let's take another step past the phone, back to our friends. I mentioned earlier we were getting together for dinner and we were talking about Academy Award winners. But what if instead, on your phone, as an alert, whatever, you got a notification that, hey, next Friday, you're getting together with some of your high school buddies. You're going to meet at this bar or this restaurant, get together, you haven't seen each other in like 6 months. It's going to be awesome. Except that you didn't schedule it, and they didn't schedule it. It scheduled it. It figured out that you hadn't seen each other in a while, you'd been talking on social media but hadn't really connected it. Has anyone else tried to make plans with another adult recently? It is so hard. Every time it's like, well, hey, this is a true example that just happened. I said, hey, we should get together sometime. They're like, I'm free Friday. And I was like, Friday's awesome, let's do it. We put it on the calendar, and on Thursday morning, they're like, hey, kid got sick, we're not gonna be free. Like, I don't wanna get you sick, whatever, so we're off for Friday. And I was like, well, how's next Friday? And they're like, I'm free in 4 weeks. Oh, right, like that is impossibly hard. And I don't know that technology is necessarily gonna solve that one, but being able to schedule get-togethers with people that you haven't seen in a little while, I'll tell you, it's just part of Star Trek. We have all these volunteers, all these people walking around wearing these shirts. Some of these people I haven't seen in person in almost 3 years. It's been amazing to be able to catch up with them, find out where they're working, how COVID has treated them. Like, they weren't people that I saw on a regular basis, but when the world was normal, I saw them every quarter or every half. It was enough that I knew what was going on with them. But the world has changed now, and it's so much harder to keep up and talk with everyone. Another one that I love is the idea of refinancing. I don't know how many of you have a mortgage here. A decent amount of you here, I would imagine. Mortgages are weird. We want to buy a house, and this is an especially trying time to find a house. The moment it goes on sale, there's 75 offers. But when you buy a house, you shop around, you look for the best interest rate, and you say, oh, I like that interest rate, which turns into this payment. I can afford it. Let's do it. Let's buy the house. And we get the loan, and we buy the house, and we do the thing. And then when is the next time you think about interest rates? Years? Something newsworthy happens. They drop the interest rates low enough that it's like, oh, you know what? Actually, it might be worthwhile. But you're not actively paying attention to it. You're just, yeah, it's been like 5 years, and it looks like that interest rate's lower. We should talk to somebody. Let's figure it out. Imagine a world where instead you get that same notification, and it says, hey, I just refinanced your house for you. Your payment went down $70. The length of the loan didn't change at all. Just wanted to let you know. What? That sounds amazing. You just renegotiated my mortgage or refinanced or did whatever. I gave you, of course, the autonomy to do that. It was a choice I made. But I don't want to pay attention to interest rates every day or every week or every month. But I do want to save $70 on my mortgage every month. That sounds amazing. So yeah, let's do that. These are the kinds of things that we can start to grow into as we have services and software looking out for our best interests. Another one I like to talk about is the shopping list. I would bet everybody in here has a different method for how you manage and think about the groceries and the shopping that you need to do. There's only about 450 apps available to manage this for you. This is also like the first tutorial app they teach you in every platform. But a shopping list at its core is a list of things we need. But is it ever really in sync with what we actually need? It's a reflection of my best effort at trying to remember all the stuff I've used. Right? My wife and I have physical pieces of paper that are magneted to the fridge, and it is organized by the sections of our specific grocery store. So that when you take that list off the fridge and you go to the store, you can go section by section by section, and it's in the order that you would want it to be. But there are apps. You can talk to Alexa. You can do all sorts of stuff to like manage a shopping list. The problem with things like shopping lists isn't the technology, it's the human. We are not good at changing behavior, and something like a shopping list requires a fundamental behavior change. If you needed to get an app, it's because you weren't good at managing your shopping list in the first place. The app doesn't solve that problem because you still aren't good at remembering to do the thing or mark it down when you run out of milk or whatever it is. We've all heard things like, well, you just need a new mindset. You need you'll get new results from that. I think all of our best intended New Year's resolutions are a demonstration that we can't just magically change ourselves. We can't just get ourselves to be a better person that we think we should be. It's hard. We all boil down to the habits and the practices that we're going to have. And the key is to get this artificial intelligence companion to meet us where we are, to be able to do the things for me that I'm not good at, that I can't handle, that I can't effectively manage very well. Here's a great example of that. I left my house. I forgot to close my garage. So some of you might think, well, oh, like I have an app on my phone now, I can close my garage, or I have voice-enabled stuff in my car, so I could just tell my car to close my garage. Here's the catch. If I could remember to close my garage, I would have pushed the button as I was driving away, but I can't always remember to do that because I'm distracted, I'm setting up music, I'm on the phone, whatever. I can't remember to close the garage, so if I have an app, if I have voice-enabled whatever, why do we think all of a sudden that I will now magically be able to remember to close the garage? I'm a forgetful person. Actually, this isn't fair. This is a stock photo. Let me show you my garage. So in my garage, no, that's not true. But you can imagine, though, even with all the best intended technology, if I can't remember to do the thing, it doesn't really matter whether or not I have the technology that makes it possible. Another great example, this is pulled directly from the files of my wife, is the hot iron or the curling iron. Right? This is for all intents and purposes, this is a fire hazard in your home. It gets very hot and left in the wrong places or left on for too long can be a problem. My wife has tried so many different ways to remember whether or not she has turned this thing off when we're leaving the house. And I found the secret to understanding whether or not it's on or off is just to drive away from the house. The moment we're in the car and leaving, I can't remember if I turned it on or off. We need to go back. Like that's the trigger every single time. And she's used all sorts of different mechanisms to try to solve this, right? She would yell, like, I'm turning off the iron. Like she would do it like actively, like have an emotional event in the bathroom just so that she could, like, no, I remember yelling, like I must have turned it off. She would take pictures of it unplugged so that later, like while we're driving, she could flip through her phone and be like, oh yeah, I unplugged it, cool. But at the end of the day, it's a thing that she doesn't remember to do. It's hard for her to remember, almost always it's unplugged or turned off. But she can't remember whether or not she did, and the fear of the house burning down is greater than the cost of going back and checking. And so I solved this with a smart plug. So if we get to a situation where we're not sure if it's on or off, we can just open an app and turn the thing off. Because she will remember once we leave. The trick with things like this is that we're spending more money on devices, we're spending more money on infrastructure, and adding more failure points. This could potentially go wrong, or the smart plug could have an issue, or there's a number of other things that could happen. What if instead we apply this AI to our homes? There are device makers today making smart fuse panels that can easily identify which fuses in your house are pulling a draw. They know what power is running through them, and you could just as easily turn those off, or it could say, in a perfect world, hey, they're not home. There seems to be a lot of power being pulled from this specific area. I'm going to turn that off. Now, that wouldn't include things like heating and cooling and stuff you would want to run when you're not home, but a bathroom is not generally a place you expect to have a lot of power being pulled when no one's in the house. So, interesting things to think about. Back to that shopping list, though, what happens when we get to the grocery store and we realize, I guess I should say, when we get home and we realize we didn't buy a few things that we need? We've all been there, right? And this is the first world of first world problems, but it's still really frustrating and annoying when you get home and you're like, oh, I was going to make this and we don't have milk or whatever. I thought we had some. So what if we could solve this with technology too? One of the examples I like is you're taking your daughter or son to soccer practice, and you get to soccer practice and you're sitting there and you're thinking through like, okay, this is what we're going to make for dinner when we get home and it'll be good. And you knew when you left that you had all the things you needed. But you have a 13-year-old son like I do who decided he was going to drink half a gallon of milk with an entire box of Oreos while you were gone. That's not a thing you could have anticipated or planned for, but I guarantee you that has actually happened in my house. And so I got home thinking, oh, I know we have plenty of milk and we'll make this, it'll be great. And I get home and the milk is gone. Now with the right sensors and refrigerator and whatever else, we would be able to know whether or not we have any milk left in the house. And when he uses it all up, or when he throws it away, or however else we want to manage that input, that event, we could very easily get a notification while we're at soccer practice that says, hey, you're out of milk. Now, I don't know if I'd believe that. I might call him and be like, did you seriously drink all the milk? Yeah, I did, and I feel terrible now. But he did it. That's one. And so I could just stop on my way home and get that thing. I was literally just out of the house. I hate that I have to go back out to get something. But another one, and we're seeing this more and more frequently across a variety of experiences, is that when I get home, milk is delivered. It recognized that I was out of the thing, it contacted a service, and it had the things that I was out of delivered to me as I was arriving home. I didn't think about this, I didn't manage it, it all happened behind the scenes. That would be awesome. You see this in a number of other things today, and I promise this is not a commercial, I just think it's cool. Amazon Dash is a great example of some of this stuff. My printer, when it runs out of ink or gets close to running out of ink, it orders more ink for me. And the ink just shows up at my house in time to make sure that I'm not going to run out of ink at any time. We see this with things like vacuums and the filters that go in them. And certainly with laundry machines. A lot of the newer washing machines, now you just pour an entire jug of detergent into it, and it dispenses it as it needs it. And then when it's out of or getting low on detergent, it orders a new bottle for you so that it shows up and you're ready to go. I don't have to think about, manage, and do any of those things. And it's not just Amazon. We're seeing this across a number of different products and categories. Another one that is surprising to me, I haven't seen much technology that reflects this at all, isn't directions. I've got a number of apps that do that. But I want you to imagine for a moment, this isn't an imagination. I am an early bird. I'm up early all the time. I get up in the morning and I just want to get stuff done. And so one of the places that I often need to go are those big box warehouse stores, right? Like Costco and Sam's Club and stuff like that. I'm going to go run and get some things from there. We're out of whatever. And so I find at like 7:30 in the morning, I'm so motivated. I'm like, I'm just going to run over to Costco, I'll get some stuff. Some of you are flinching right now like, dude, that place doesn't open until 10. You're right. I didn't know that. And so I rolled into the parking lot at 8 o'clock. I'm the only car there. And I even walked up and I was like, what's going on? And the sign right on the building says, oh, it opens 10 to 8 or whatever. That's great hours. I wish I worked there. But as we think about that process, the function of me getting in my car and going to a destination only to find out that it's closed, or in a worse case, only to find out that they're out of the thing I was going there for. We've all experienced that as well. Why couldn't technology solve that for us? Why couldn't technology recognize, like, hey, it looks like you're going to Costco. They don't open until 10. That's 2 hours from now. Why are you going now? That's the kind of stuff that we could solve, right? You don't want to run into a sign that looks like this at 8 a.m. That's painful. So this leads us to another thing. As we think about the technology we have in our cars and the way that we're moving around, Alexa is starting to show up in cars, but what we're seeing more often is that car manufacturers themselves are building their own voice assistants, right? You can talk to a BMW now, and you can talk to a Ford. And in each of them, you're talking to a voice assistant that was constructed by the car manufacturer themselves. This leads to an interesting thought experiment when we think about the fact that everybody, and I mean everybody, is building their own voice assistant. I can't emphasize enough, if you haven't looked into voice, like, there's a lot coming, and it would be worthwhile for you to know how the pieces and parts work. But as we think about having a voice assistant in every device, for every service, right? I mean, you could talk to most of your apps now. You can order Little Caesars with your voice in their app. You could talk to Caesar? I don't know. But as we get into all of that, we start to realize that it sounds silly for me to have one device with one dedicated voice in it. And so one of the other things that we're going to see as a part of this is what we call the Voice Interoperability Initiative. You're going to see every voice able to run on every device. So if you really like talking to your car, well, you can talk to BMW in your car, whatever vehicle you have, but you can also talk to it on your Echo. And when you're in your car, you can say, hey, BMW, what's my calendar look like today? And it's going to say, oh, actually, I don't know anything about your calendar, but here, Alexa does. Here's Alexa. And now you're talking to Alexa in your car, or Google Assistant, or Siri, or whatever it happens to be. Whatever one best serves your purpose for the thing that you're trying to do, that will be available. This is a huge, huge initiative across all of the people that are playing in this space. It's really exciting. I honestly, like, this is going to change the game. And it starts that democratization of data. It starts the idea that we're going to let the best assistant do the best thing for you without trying to compete and say, well, I have this device, and we're going to build a wall, and you can only use my thing on my device. Could you imagine, like, if there's hundreds of assistants out there all trying to help you, and you're like, your kitchen counter is just littered with different devices for each? That would be crazy. This is the right way to go. So as we think about all this, this is my future. This is where I want to be. I want to be able to stand here and take a deep breath and not worry about the bills and the worries and the concerns and all the other stuff that we have going on in our day-to-day lives. I want to know that artificial intelligence, this companion of mine, is handling all of that nonsense for me so that I can do the things that I want to do. I want to spend my time doing the things I want to spend my time doing. And I think all of you do too. So Alexa's the beginning of it. Skills are the beginning of it. If you want to get in on the foundation of what this is going to become, this is where you start. Alexa skills, Google Actions. This is the foundation on which all of this other stuff is going to be built. It's not all going to be touch interfaces. There's accessibility reasons. There's a number of other reasons why voice ultimately is going to be a big part of all of our lives. It might come in different fashions. I'm sure there are many of you in the room that are like, I don't want a microphone in my house all the time. Do you leave your phone in your mailbox when you go in? Like, there's a lot of ways to think about how this stuff is really going to affect us and the things that we really have going in our lives. So I am excited about the idea of this connected world where all of this data comes together and makes my life so much simpler, so much cleaner in a way that I can do the things that I care about rather than just chasing down the mundane day-to-day. So with that, I will say thank you. If you guys want to track me down, if you have any questions, if you want to talk about any of this in the future, you can find me as @JeffBlankenburg literally everywhere. Thank you, guys. Also, if you are actually interested in Alexa, we have an awesome Slack community. You're welcome to join, talk with other people that are building cool things, and get a feel for what this is all like. We'd love to have you join us.